He went on liberal late night to prove his brain works right. Joe Biden leaving his CPAP machine on Air Force One for an afternoon taping of Late Night with Seth Meyers. The big guy trying to show America how hip he can be without breaking one. As a staggering number of Americans say he's blown a short circuit. His latest poll has 64% of registered voters saying that they don't think Biden is mentally fit for another term. And boy, did he reassure them.
You got to take a look at the other guy. He's about as old as I am, but he can't remember his wife's name.
Yeah.
And it's about how old your ideas are. Look, I mean, this is a guy who wants to take us back. Everything we've gotten done, he's just friendly stated he wants to do away with if he gets elected. And I really think his views on where to take America are older than... Anyway, I don't want to get going.
He ran out. Well, it was a race to see who fell asleep faster, the president or Seth's dwindling audience. And even Obama's old crew ain't optimistic about fixing up the old busted geezer.
If you watch Joe Biden speak, oftentimes he sounds frail, and he sounds more frail than he used to, even in 2019 and 2020. Now, that may, and I think doesn't, have anything to do with how sharp he is mentally, but the voice sounds frail, and he shuffles more because of the arthritis in his back. So for most people in the country who are just watching him be president, what do they see when they turn on the television?
Not much. Later on that day, Joe's caretakers allowing him a little treat, and the president using the moment as an ice cream olive branch to the Muslim community who are upset with his handling of the war in Israel and vowing to withhold their support in today's Michigan Democratic primary.
Can you give us a sense of when you think that ceasefire will start, sir?
Well, I hope by the beginning of the weekend. I mean, the end of the weekend. At least my national security advisor tells me that we're close. We're close. It's not done yet. And my hope is by next Monday, we'll have a ceasefire.
Well, that's interesting, Jesse. He skips the Super Bowl, which had 125 million viewers, to do a show with 12 people watching. Mm-hmm. Was it because the questions were like softballs?
So I've never done one of those late night shows, but I've known people that have done those, not including yours. And I've been there behind the scenes with a guest on these shows, and these are very highly scripted events. Mm. Even days before you'll appear, you'll have to do pre-interview after pre-interview, maybe 3 to 4 pre-interviews with the producer to make sure everything is perfect. Mm-hmm. What you're going to say, what even they're going to ask you, exactly the order it's going to go in. And then when you get out there, I believe they're having a guy hold up a sign that says applause, mm-hmm. because the president puts his sunglasses on and everybody starts clapping. Mm-hmm. Now, I've seen people put their sunglasses on. I've never clapped. I've never laughed. What's so funny about a man putting his sunglasses on? And then he's asked if what the difference between him and Donald Trump is, and he starts talking about all that he's accomplished, and he can't name one single thing that he's accomplished. And then he's basically just lost his train of thought. So these are teed up for him, and he can't even deliver those lines. Now, the ice cream, you know my rule about men eating soup in public. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's manly to go like that with a soup and you're blowing on it. It's just not a good look. I think the same thing for ice cream. You should save that for vacation. A grown man, especially the president, should not be licking ice cream in public, especially while he's talking about life and death. When a woman is dead in Georgia, when there's a ceasefire underway, possibly in the Gaza Strip, it sends the wrong message, Greg. And I don't think anybody's scared of him. And it's almost like if you were running this operation behind the scenes, I would make him lick ice cream like that in public to make him look weak and stupid and old.
He only has ice cream in public. There's no sense in like having a half gallon at home. It's like having a green banana for Joe.
Do you eat the green bananas?
No, I'm just saying it's too risky.
For what do you mean, bowly?
No, it's just like having a green banana. He won't be there when it ripes.
I got the age joke. I got that.
Yes.
Kind of like your sweater.
Yes, thank you. By the way, so Harold, I don't know, who's more deserving of sympathy, Joe or Seth?
Good to be back with you. You have to think the White House was trying to figure out an audience that he's not reaching. I would agree. Nobody has the numbers that you have.
That is true,
exclamation point. But I think that maybe there's a younger audience. He'll get some good reps. Get us another rep for him. He'll have some social media footage to chime out, too. We have to accept both of our candidates. It looks like we're going to nominate for president, Democrat and Republican side, are both older guys. And they both, one thing you're not surprised by is if you hear tomorrow, and this is my father's 79 and my best friend in the world, but if you hear that a 75-year-old guy or older passes tomorrow, you're not totally shocked. So these guys are older. I'm not saying anything like that's going to happen to them. We've got two guys that we've nominated that are pretty old, or likely nominated to run for president. 3, the Obama speechwriters, I listened to them. The last thing they said was the advice they had for Biden, and they certainly were critical of some of the things, and we played it. Their advice to him was for the handlers in the White House to let President Biden be himself, that they say that he has a temper. They say that he quips about things that may be kind of off-brand, off-color. They said, let one of those things tweet out or let it go viral and let people see that he does have a lot of things going on in his mind and a lot of ways he may say things that people may not think. 4, the situation in Michigan is real. It'll be interesting tonight to see what those numbers are. I say not for tonight, but for what it means in the fall. There's a long time between now and November, obviously. But I know the White House is looking at this, not just from the Michigan vote, but I think the notion and the push and whatever momentum we have in trying to achieve some sort of different posture on the part of the Israelis, the Gazans, and the Palestinians in that region of the world, obviously conditioned upon the release of the hostages and making sure that Hamas is as weak as they can be, and even looking at what Netanyahu did not do before October 7th. That's what they have to be aiming towards, not just for Michigan, but I think for the country. Because you look at our effort in Ukraine, which I support, you look at our effort in Israel, and I support the Israelis, our efforts to support the Israelis. The American people, and President Trump is reflective of this as well, does not believe that America should be engaged or embroiled in wars, be it a proxy war or an actual war. We'd rather be at proxy than actual. But I think the American people, by and large, and I think President Trump's campaign reflected this in 2016 and even now, is one that says we need to have less war and more peace.
So you're actually coming out and supporting Trump? I caught that last part.
That was your takeaway?
Yeah, that was. Well, I kind of drifted for a while. You know, Judge, let's be honest here, and Jesse hit on it, that this was a heavily orchestrated moment. They took Seth Meyers' show because they know nobody watches it, and if it does okay, it'll be clips, and they can control every movement from the applause to getting them carted in and unpacked for the set.
Yeah, there's no question. It was carefully curated. It was pre-taped so that they can edit it. But, in between slurps of his ice cream cone, Forrest Gump is it's starting to exhaust me with all of this. I personally am sick and tired of hearing about how much he loves ice cream and how much fun it is. And it's almost like he's a weak child who's got to get ice cream as a prize in order for him to go out and talk to the American people. Look, as the world is burning, Joe Biden is licking his ice cream, and it's pathetic. And so many Dems want to replace him with someone else. One of the stats we found out about was that 20% of the likely Dems want Michelle, and 15% of Dems likely to vote want Kamala. Now, I really think it's time for Kamala to be the person to run for president on the Democrat side.
Is that an endorsement?
I think, yeah, absolutely. I think it's her time to shine and run for president. Picking anyone else would be unfair to this woman, an insult to a woman who climbed the ladder the hard way. So I think it's really Kamala Harris's time to run for president. But that's another issue. I'm sick and tired of their saying that Donald Trump doesn't know Melania Trump from a Mercedes Schlapp. He was talking to Mercedes Schlapp at CPAC, and they said, oh, he was talking about Melania and then call her Mercedes. No, he said Mercedes. Do you believe it? I mean, it's ridiculous. And in the end, they want the best result from a guy they won't even let out of the White House. And it's not going to work. The American people are not stupid. Biden did 86 interviews, and during the same time, Obama did 422, and Trump did 300. Now, there's a reason he's only doing 86. He's not capable of doing more than 86. The man cannot get up for 2 hours without a note and go on and ad-lib in front of an audience of thousands of people. He's incapable of doing it. So stop telling us how great he is and how much energy he has. Or is it that he only has energy in private but not in public?
Joe has given you an ice cream headache. Hey, so Princess Pepto, what say you?
Thank you, Greg. It's always a pleasure to join you. I'll wrap this up pretty succinctly. I think those were two moments of really important honesty coming from the left. That Obama aide sounding the alarm over a frail, mumbling, stumbling Joe Biden, calling it a very real issue. While not a unique thought, one many at home are having as they watch the current president, still something that is being said by the left. And on Ro Khanna, on the move in Michigan, and the call for a ceasefire while holding an ice cream cone. Democrat Ro Khanna busting the president's chops, saying he only cares about politics. He's just trying to avoid embarrassment in Michigan. I'll finish with this thought. While he's standing there with that ice cream, think about that moment where there are Americans all over the country who are skipping their ice cream because they can't afford it right now. The president's own U.S. Department of Agriculture just came out with spending prices. The American people right now are spending more of their disposable income on food, whether it's grocery or at the restaurant, than they have in over 30 years.
That's 11%
our C block,
of
their
Sandra.
Disposable income.
That's our C block.
That's incredible.
Don't jump ahead.
But I digress.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Craig.
No, go ahead.
But I think it's a really, really, really real thought that you're hearing from Democrats, and they're starting to say it out loud, and I think that's really important. Thank you, Greg.
You're quite welcome. And you look great, by the way.
Thank you. I like your green,
pink.
too.
All right, coming up.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.